This is Basket Case Clubs, CPR Group's podcast where we turn basket case clubs into showcase clubs. Hello everyone and welcome back to Basket Case Clubs. My name's Michael Connolly and it is my pleasure to be your host today. Joining me as usual is my brother and partner in basket casey goodness, Steve Connolly. G'day, Steve.
Hello. Yes, we're back on the basket case train and back for 2025, which is exciting. It's already
Halfway through Feb.
halfway through Feb. It's no longer the first month. So we're not going to say Happy New Year,
You just did though.
but we're going to say,
That's like saying, I'm not going to say I told you so, but,
yeah,
which is almost as good as no offense, but no offense, but buckle up because this is going to
I'm about to say something really offensive.
Yeah. And possibly a little insensitive. Yes. So we got lots of good stuff to talk. Well, there's always lots of good stuff to talk about in the world of basket case clubs because we still have basket case clubs. It's funny. We've been sitting here before starting the recording today talking about things that go wrong in clubs. And Steve, before we start, I just want to reflect on why we do this podcast. I think that, you know, it's to share the common problems that happen in clubs, and more importantly than that, to share a solution. So hopefully people who are listening, who are seeing the telltale signs of the problems that we're talking about, will be able to leapfrog them and not actually even have to implement a solution because they can head it off at the pass. But in all honesty, sometimes it feels like we do this as a bit of catharsis because we need somebody else to talk to / vent at / bitch to about all of the dumb shit that still happens in clubs because people get so freaking invested in stuff that's not actually important. We get involved in sport because we love sport. Like rarely, it's not never, but very, very rarely when I ask the question, so who joined this club because they wanted to go to meetings? Very rarely do people put their hands up and say, yes, I joined because I love meetings. There are some people out there, and probably I reckon that I'm sitting with two of them right now.
There aren't a whole heap more than us. No, that's not true. And what I find really interesting is whenever I'm talking with a club about challenges that they're facing, and you, I'm sure, will have had this same experience, and others in our company certainly have also, where you'll kind of stop them partway through their explanation of the challenges they're facing or the nonsense behaviour that they're experiencing from one or more members, and we kind of say, and then I bet this happened and that happened, and this is probably how you're feeling, or I bet this is what your constitution says and how it doesn't support you in this situation. And they say, oh my God, you must have a crystal ball, or you must,
have been a fly on the wall.
Yeah, no, it's just that a lot of this shit's been faced by other clubs in the past.
Yeah. But having said that, you're right. There's so many times where we go, yep, seen that before. Yep, seen that before. But I still get surprised at how much new stuff comes up. I've just spent an hour today learning about some really complex auditing stuff that has become really important for one particular club. And you go, okay, that's critical, and this is the sort of stuff that an auditor knows about. But as soon as it becomes an issue for one club, you go, right, this could be an audit issue for other clubs. Yep. So it's worthwhile us being across that. Anyway, fascinating. So I'd like to, speaking of being a fly on the wall, I'd like to take you back to, I'm sure you can reminisce on some of the stuff that I'm about to go through. So you're at a general meeting of a club, and it's rooms packed. There's a good, nice atmosphere. A bit tense because
if the room's packed, the atmosphere is tense. Can I just in terms of being an oracle, as I've just stated, people aren't going to turn up unless
to say,
shit's going
"Gee,
down.
I'm happy." Yeah, it's like
everything you're doing on that committee of yours, you're doing it well, and that's why I'm here, is to thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Okay. Yes.
Said no club member ever.
Yeah. So that's the meeting that's tense. So there's going to be a vote for something. Anyway, so the chair hushes the room down, says, right, everyone, please take your seats. We're about to get started. And then somebody at the back of the room says, right, this is all a joke. And that meeting hasn't even opened. And somebody's already saying, this is a joke. I'm voting against this stupid thing. The chair looks at this person who they don't recognize, and they go, excuse me, are you a member of this club? Then the person at the back of the room goes, yep, I paid for my junior club membership when I was 17, and I've been here for the last 10 years, and nobody's ever challenged it. So yes, I'm a member. Then somebody else says, "Well, yeah, I'm a member as well. I'm a life member. I haven't paid fees for a decade, but I've always had a vote. I've always been able to vote." And then somebody else says, "Yeah, but I only just joined as a social member, so I could turn up tonight. So I think I should get a say too, because I've paid my $2 to be a social member. Therefore, I get a say on this issue." And then yeah, so it goes on, and then like they've just called it to order, and then all of a sudden it's chaos again, straight away. So the reason that this often happens, and the reason that so many committees scramble around like this, is because the classes of membership in the Constitution aren't right. Each time we get into a Constitution review, and I'll let you speak for yourself, but certainly when I get into it, and it might be that is the project we're working on, we're doing a Constitution review, or we get up to the bit where we need to write a Constitution and a larger governance restructure. For me, I'm going to say more than 90 times out of 100, membership and the classes of membership in the Constitution is where we end up spending most of the time.
Certainly, a lot of the time, and I think that part of the reason for that is that we spend so much of our time undoing a lot of the nonsense that exists in the minds of committee members or the people with whom we're working on that Constitution review or governance project, in saying no, that's just someone that may have been the oracle of your club 30 years ago, thought and told you and everyone else before you, whereas this is what your Constitution actually says. And one of the other big pitfalls that I see, or common pitfalls that I see, at the other end of the spectrum of membership classes in a Constitution not providing enough information, is at the other end of the spectrum, classes of membership providing too much information and being, broken down into 15 different classes of membership. And we could talk about, how you should be structuring your classes of membership shortly. But the common reality here is that people are left at meetings feeling really uncomfortable, and often they're making, these meetings are seeking to make a really important decision, whether that's a decision relating to a bucket load of money that the club might or might not spend, depending on what members say, or someone's had their membership terminated and this is a meeting to hear an appeal against that termination. Really critical in the process of natural justice and ensuring that that person has an opportunity to have their say. If the meeting turns to custard, I think that really fundamentally undermines the democratic process. So certainly agree that this is something that we've faced many, many times, and that lots of our listeners will have inevitably faced as well. And the more people that we can stop getting into situations like this, the better we feel like we're doing our job.
Yeah. So I'm actually going to grill you, Steve, and say, walk me through what you think are the best classes of membership to have. And obviously we don't need to get the terminology right, and you can give me some options, and keep in mind that every constitution needs to reflect the personality of the specific club that it's written for. So it shouldn't be the same. There shouldn't be a pro form. People say, "Oh, can you just give us your template constitution?" And we say, "Well, we don't have one, because we need to build a constitution based on the personality of the club that we're working with, as seen through the eyes of the leaders of that club at any given time." But before we get to the point of, let's talk about resolution and how this should work, let's go back to some of those pitfalls that you reckon clubs have. So the first one that I've seen is where there's not enough differentiation. It's just the classes of membership, or the membership of the club shall include ordinary members, and that's it. So it doesn't then actually define anything about.
Oh, it gets better than that though, because then you know that it's been haphazardly, that constitution has been haphazardly thrown together by people who have got other competing priorities, like setting up their club when it was brand new. Because then, all the states and territories across the country that have got their model rules, the template document that new groups can use as a basis for theirs when they're setting up. In some states, it then has a little italicized note to say, add any other classes here. And often that's still in the Constitution. Hey, guys, if you're not adding any other classes in, you can delete that bit. But that's so common. That's so common.
Guide. Yeah, absolutely. So that leads. Already. So that obviously leads to ambiguity. You also mentioned then going to the other end of the spectrum and having too many classes. What do you mean by that? How does that hurt a club?
I'll answer by prefacing what I think we'll come back to when we talk about some of the essential inclusions when you're coming up with your classes, and that is that in your constitution, we advocate that the classes of membership section is really important to set out two main factors: who is allowed, which classes of membership have voting rights at your general meetings, including your AGM, and which classes of members are eligible to be elected to your board or committee. Now, depending on the legal structure of your organisation and where you're established as a legal entity, that may or may not be a requirement of your regulatory body to whom you report, nor the legislation under which you're established as a legal entity. Nevertheless, we say, for the reasons that we've started to uncover in this discussion, that's where the clarity is really important. Who can be on the committee and who can vote at your general meetings? And if people are in a class of membership that doesn't come with either or both of those rights, then they can't do those things. And to your example that you started with, that is so common that we have not only people at a general meeting who are, voting and being very boisterous and leading the meeting down a certain path, but also people who end up on a committee who might not actually be members of that organisation and therefore might not actually be eligible to be on the committee, and that can lead to all sorts of pickles in which that club might find themselves. So,
like maybe not having the insurance that they thought, or not even having their incorporation stand up to scrutiny.
Really important. That's it. We're starting to talk about some really critical things there, and as I often, I've had reason in my own personal life to make some insurance claims over the last few years, and I can say that those experiences have been quite pleasant, surprisingly. I've been dealt with in a I'm trying to be diplomatic and talk about insurance.
Way.
As a person. Yep. But nevertheless, I still say in the context of clubs being compliant and operating in a manner that is, expected of them by virtue of their legal status, there's one thing that insurance companies are really good at getting out of doing, and that's paying up. So don't give them any opportunity to not pay up. Have those compliance gaps that you might identify filled. For instance, only people who are eligible to be on your committee on your frickin' committee. So now I've gone on that journey. I've forgotten the question you asked me. Am I talking about some of the common pitfalls?
No, well, no, that's the problem if we don't get this right. That's absolutely right. And you touched on those too. You've got to understand the rights and obligations of each class of member. And that's why not having enough information is the problem. But the question was, what about when there's too many and there's too much in there? Like I can give you some examples, but where have you seen that be difficult for clubs?
I think one of the really common ones is where a constitution in the classes of membership section breaks down categories of membership based on who gets certain access to that club's facilities on which days of the week, or who has certain rights for levels of participation that the club might offer. For instance, a golf club or a bowls club, certain levels of membership or tiers of membership might come with the right to play golf or bowls at that club's facilities on certain days of the week or in certain competitions. That stuff often, however, leads to a duplication in terms of the two main factors, who can vote and who can be on the committee. If you've got several classes of membership in your constitution that have the same voting rights and committee eligibility as one another, we often ask the question, does it make sense to have these classes of membership broken down to that level of granularity in your constitution? Some clubs really don't want to be dissuaded. The vast majority, however, say, yeah, that makes sense. We can deal with what playing rights or what other privileges come with your membership in terms of how much you pay and therefore what you receive. We can deal with that outside the Constitution. And the benefit of doing that outside the Constitution is if you want to change any of those categories of, subcategories or subclasses of membership, as we sometimes call them, you can make that change without having to amend your Constitution. And you can amend them in your membership policy or in your bylaws, for instance. Internally, you don't need to update the Constitution and follow the statutory amendment process, which is applicable to your organisation.
The other thing that I've seen happen is when they try and group things together. So if you've got relevant classes that we'll go through in a moment. So you've got a class for mum and dad, you've got a class for the kids, you've got a class for the people who've been of good service to the club, you've got a class for some ceremonial type members, you've got a class for the people who don't get voting rights, but they might get some other privileges of membership like food discounts at the canteen or something. Then if that's enough, you don't then need to also have different types of family memberships where they're packaged together in a certain way. So you can take a McValue meal approach and say, we've got enough classes, it's just certain fees will buy you certain numbers of memberships. So an entire family membership might equal a membership for mum, a membership for dad, and a membership for up to 3 of their kids. So we can deal with it in packages that don't need, and they don't need to be constitutional, because it's just the menu items aren't changing. It's just how we're buying them can change. So that's where I've seen that go into too much detail. So your examples were absolutely right, where it's stuff that is really getting into the nitty-gritty operational detail that does not need to be in a constitution. And in fact, I would suggest it's more difficult if it is in the constitution, because the constitution's a hard thing to change. It shouldn't it shouldn't include those things that might change from year to year, because then it's got to be changed. It's got to get voted through at the general meeting. It's then got to be registered, and it's only then, in most cases, that it comes into effect. So you don't want to be doing that all the time.
Yep.
All right. So now talk me through what you think the common types of membership should be.
Okay. So keeping in mind the two critical factors of who can vote at general meetings and who can be on the committee or board, who's eligible for election to the committee or board, I think that there should be a class of adult members that ticks both of those boxes. And you used the term ordinary earlier. Often we see that in a lot of model rules, the template constitutions across the country. We don't like to advocate for ordinary. So
yeah, I know. I would never like to be an ordinary member. I'm an extraordinary member.
That's it. But we might call them, something else, like full members, for instance.
I've seen voting members, seen adult
voting.
Members. Yeah. Yep.
Yep. Yeah, you're right. And there's, as long as the definition of the class is really clear in the Constitution,
that's the important
you can call them. Call them
Oracle members, Steve. Going back to your old.
There we go. Well, we're coming to them. Yes, the life members will be up shortly. So it's important to note that depending on the nature of your organisation, you might have only adult members, people over the age of 18, or you might have some junior members, and it makes sense to categorise those and acknowledge them formally in the Constitution, in which case that should be a class of membership in your Constitution. And typically the parents of those juniors.
Typically the junior members aren't going to be able to vote. So then we get to the point of how does a junior member who's had their fees paid for them by mum and dad, how do they get their rights advocated to the committee or to the club through a general meeting?
And often, let's imagine it's a junior club where there's only junior participants. No one's over 18, in terms of the players. Therefore, no one's going to be eligible to be on the management committee, and typically speaking, people aren't going to be able to vote at general meetings. So as you say, sometimes parents will be afforded the ordinary or full or voting membership on behalf of their child. So if one child gets signed on, maybe that'll come with one adult membership for one of the parents. And if the other parent wants to get the voting rights and committee eligibility, they might be able to join separately. And this is very much, as you said, a discussion that needs to be had in the context of each club's operating environment and how they want to do things. And we'll then, when we're working with the club to do the heavy lifting in preparing their constitution, we will ask the questions that enable us to then prepare clear classes of membership that set out these voting rights and eligibility factors. So I mentioned life members. Life members, I think, for many organisations, a very important class of membership, and they're often recognised as the oracles, those people who've given a lot to the club, given willingly of their own time, and have been at some point recognised by being awarded life membership. We often say that a life member should get the same voting rights and committee eligibility as a full member, pretty much forever until they die. Now, if we're talking at a club level, at an organisation level where people are the members and the full members get voting rights and committee eligibility, then typically we'll see that same set of rights given to life members.
It's funny how often life membership leads to fights, and that's why after we finish this episode, we're going to come back and dig into life membership in an upcoming episode just for that reason, because it can really. I see this upcoming episode about life membership really as poking the bear, because so many clubs get this wrong, and and it's important that they get it right, given how important life membership is to so many of them.
Yeah, it is. It is a sensitive topic, as you say, and often it's not gotten right. And what I mean by that can go both ways. It's in terms of life members maybe sometimes not being afforded sufficient rights by virtue of what they've given, as opposed to the other end of the spectrum where they're given too much in the way of voting rights and committee eligibility. There are then other classes of membership. You mentioned social members. They might be people who pay a little bit of money to get discounts on food and drink, but which, that membership class might not come with voting rights and committee eligibility, and that's most common. But again, it needs to be bespoke for your organisation.
Sometimes we see social members have a lot of weight, as in there's a lot of them in clubs like a leagues club or a bowls club that's the licensed venue that has the gaming, the bar and the dining facilities. So do you want your people, like I mentioned at the top, do you want your people who are paying $2 to have the same voting privileges as the people who've been there for 20 years and either been like star performers on the field or parents for a long time? So that's where you can differentiate that and say, no, that's fine. You can be a member and then you go on our database and you can go into the members draws every Friday night. But if you want to vote, then you've got to be this class of member, which means that you're then becoming in effect a governing member, because these clubs, our clubs, the way that incorporated associations work democratically is that they're member-driven clubs. They're member-driven in that it's the members who make the big decisions, like who are going to be our leaders, the elections each year. Should we change our name? Should we merge or amalgamate with another organisation? Should we wind up? Should we change our constitution? Those are the big decisions that are left for members. But it's really clear that we know who those members are, so that we don't run the risk of having 10,000 social members all expecting that they can turn up to the AGM and have a say in the future of this club. So it's got to be clear, and it's got to be clear from the outset, so that when you do get to that general meeting, special general meeting, annual general meeting, whatever type of general meeting it is, and somebody turns up who doesn't have a right to vote, that they can be turned away at the door, and that caveat emptor, they should have known that.
Yeah, just quickly on that, on a procedural, on a process consideration.
I could see the little cogs turning in your head as I'm talking, going, oh, there's so many things that we need to discuss.
Yeah, not enough time, not enough minutes in the day. But that sort of setting of clear ground rules and having a process through which you ensure when people are walking into a meeting that you're checking them off on the register of member and giving them either a orange ticket or a blue ticket, depending on whether they get to vote or not. Some simple mechanisms like that immediately change the dynamic of the meeting upon someone entering the room. So that it's the people who should be in control who are in control, absolutely, and not those people who shouldn't be in control getting the meeting out of control. Yep, absolutely. So then we do see some other classes like corporate members, for instance, if an organisation wants to capitalise on the potential benefits of tapping into sponsorship arrangements that might come with one or more memberships of the organisation. Again, very much horses for courses there. There's no one-size-fits-all approach. Affiliate members, and again, this is where an organisation, if they have people as members as well as organisations as members, that they might look to
like a regional association with clubs that play within it.
That's right. They might have the clubs as their members, and that might be fine. Or it might be time to consider whether they separate it out and have people as the members and affiliates, which are the organisations that affiliate to them.
Yeah. But then who gets to vote, who gets to sit on the committee? All of these things need clarity.
That's it. Absolutely. That's and in those instances, as you know, they'll often be representative or representatives of those affiliates that vote on behalf of the affiliate at general meetings of the regional body.
Yeah.
And then there might be associate members, for instance, and this is by no means an exhaustive list, but certainly, most of our constitutions end up with a handful or less of classes of membership for the reasons that, we've talked through in terms of the clarity being the most important consideration here. And associate members then, might have limited rights and privileges.
Like ceremonial type memberships. And again, it
could
depends
be.
how they're defined, because in some cases, an associate is a really important term. So when
Yeah.
you've got associates of professional associations, for instance, that's actually, associates and fellows, the really important people in an organization. And in others, it might be, oh, no, that's just something that we give to recognize the fact that some sporting goods stores given us sponsorship for a long time. So we give them
Yeah.
a plaque every year, but they don't get to vote.
Yeah.
Fine, whatever you call it, so long as it's clear, whether it's voting, whether it's non-voting, the other rights that come with that. So rights to sit on the committee, for instance, any obligations of membership. So what rules do they need to uphold? Yeah. So it's funny because there's so much of what we've just talked about that in preparing for this, we thought, oh, this will be a skim, it'll be a flyby, but you can't, because there's so much that is, and this is why it's this topic where we let people know this is going to be the important bit. So let's not get through the easy stuff first and push this to the end when we're all tired. Let's actually tackle this right up front, because so much of the questions that we're going to run through later when we're getting into some of the nitty gritty, like how a general meeting works or how you manage that turn up and sign in process for a general meeting, comes back to getting this bit right. So take the time. So as far as key takeaways goes, that's really it. Go and have a crack. Have a look at what's in there. And there's a good chance that you're going to find out, oh, there's actually not that many, or those that are there don't have enough definition of what their obligations are, what rules do they need to uphold, how can they be removed? Is all of that in there? Why, we're now dealing with some other of the classes, but again, these are the sorts of things that hang off it. What are their rights? Can they vote? Can they not vote? If I'm a parent of a junior, I don't have a voting right, and you were kind of alluding to this before, I don't have a voting right on behalf of the junior member. I should be a member so that it's very clear that I'm voting because I have membership rights that include voting. And then there's the question about, well, if I've got 3 kids, how come I don't get 3 votes? That's not how democracy works. Take a council analogy. That's not how democracy works for council. If I own 3 properties, I live in one, and I've got 2 investment properties all within the one council area, how many votes do I get? I get 1 vote as a resident. I don't get a voter as a property owner, which is also why when we then go and talk about residential investment, that you get screwed for additional rates. Well, you can't vote me out. Screw you. Pay double, mate. Don't care.
Yep.
Oh, anyway, so Steve, one of the things that we find when we go through this exercise, you know this, but one of the things that I find is that when we start having this conversation with people, they go, Michael, I've got no idea where to start. And that's why we've got a page on our website. I think it's cprgroup.com.au/constitution assessment, which is exactly what it sounds like. If you want your constitution to have somebody who does this day in, day out, have a look over it, then just go in there, pop it in, and we'll have a look through it. No, this is something that we do at no cost because we know how tough this is for people. And not unlike the length of this episode, every single time we run a session for councils, for peak associations, in student organisations, in professional associations, every single time we run a session on the topic of the Constitution, people kind of think, oh, I'm going to this because I have to, and they're going to be bored, and they never let us leave. It's like they're saying, no, stay, tell us more, because this actually is fascinating stuff, and it's really easy to get it right. It's straightforward to get it right. It's not easy because of the knock-on effect. And so that's why we've got that offer to say, hey, if you want somebody to have a look at it and provide you kind of what is sometimes a bit of some brutal findings, to say, whoa, this is not even consistent with the Act anymore because it's, written in the 80s and got coffee stains and red wine stains all over it. So it's definitely time to review it. But we can tell you why, so we can go through and do that.
And often, in our experience at least, the listeners to this podcast are the people who are driving for positive change in their organisation, and maybe this is what you need in the way of ammunition to put in front of other committee members to say, see, our constitution really is out of date and we really do need a new one. Whether you get our help with it or not, it might be just what you need.
Yeah, it's so funny, Steve. So what you're saying is it's a bit like when my kids come home and say, oh my God, Dad, you'll never believe what a teacher at school told me. I go, I've been telling you that for the last 10 years, and you're
Yeah.
only but it's it's always the hearing it from someone else syndrome.
Yep.
Steve, thank you very much for joining me on this very fun journey through membership. I think that it's really important that we have these sorts of conversations. So thanks for being here. If you are not already connected to us on social media, make sure you do so. Make sure you go to our website, cprgroup.com.au/constitution assessment to upload a copy of your constitution. While you're there, you might as well sign up for our newsletter. What we do with our newsletter is make sure that it's good stuff that you kind of should know about, but it's not, you're not going to get one every week. It's going to be enough so that you go, oh, I didn't know that was something that we should know about. And we'll make sure you know about it. And of course, you can give us a call and have a chat. We love hearing from our listeners as to the sorts of things that you want us to go through. So if you've got further ideas for our podcast, just jump into our website and there's a contact us button right there. Let us know. We'd be very happy to hear it. Steve, thanks again to you and of course to Jess for being our editor and making us sound probably better than we look. And until next time, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me and everybody else. See ya.
Bye. Basket Case Clubs acknowledges the traditional custodians of the country on which we record, being Yugambeh, Turrbal, Jagera and Kabi Kabi land. We recognise their enduring connection to land, waters and culture and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to First Nations listeners.